"I'm leaving," I declared. "Fine, and don't come back," responded my spouse. Usually, when I walked out the door, my parting remark would be "go to hell." But this time I felt that I didn't want my final words to her to be so harsh. Over the 14 years of our marriage, we exchanged such expressions many times, but this time I won't be returning. In a few days, she might understand the meaning behind my words. Over the past 6 months, Natalie, my wife, has become increasingly hurtful in her remarks toward me. I couldn't understand what was happening. Her words were sharp and offensive. To avoid escalating the situation, I began avoiding her as much as possible. I spent more and more time at the hospital, coming home late, even after Natalie and our 13-year-old daughter had already had dinner. Sometimes I found leftovers. Sometimes they were already in the trash before I got home. My name is Marcus K. Reynolds. Actually, my full name is David Marcus Reynolds, but to avoid confusion with my father, also named David, they started calling me Marcus. I'm not a junior. My father is David James Reynolds. Why he didn't give me the name Junior, I don't know. I would have been happy even with the nickname Junior or DJ, but I was limited to Marcus or nothing. Yes, I'm a physician, or more precisely, a dedicated cardiothoracic surgeon, and yes, I've heard all the jokes about how surgeons think they're gods. Living in a medical community with a population of about 10,000, I've become the subject of many of them. Although formally I'm board certified in both general and cardiothoracic surgery, my colleagues tend to focus solely on my surgical specialty, but my surname Reynolds makes me just another doctor in their eyes. My wife, who will soon become my ex-wife, turned out not to be the person I thought she was. I found out about this just 4 weeks ago. My distant behavior over the past months was caused by her cruel words and actions. One Monday evening, I decided to have a snack at a local restaurant and overheard a conversation in the next booth. It turned out that my wife and my best friend, Michael Tanner, were deceiving me. It was a blow. They talked about how they spent time together while I was busy in surgery, unaware of anything. I left, trying to get away so they wouldn't notice me. It was unbelievable. Natalie was with Michael. He even served as my best man at our wedding. He's my anesthesiologist who has been working with me on surgical cases for years. Although strictly speaking, he's not exclusively my anesthesiologist, but an independent practitioner who works throughout our hospital system. Yes, I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon. I've also heard all those jokes and insults about surgeons' egos. However, my practice is very respected. People know they will get exceptional care. They also know that I am responsible for my patients. If complications arise, I take care of them. Michael has always been a skilled anesthesiologist, and I keep him busy with referrals and praise his work to the department head. I wanted him to join my specialized surgical team exclusively, but he said that he won't respect himself if he becomes attached to just one surgeon's practice. He said it jokingly, but I knew he was serious. Regardless, I requested him as my preferred anesthesiologist, although he was not exclusively dedicated to my service. In fact, my procedures represented a significant portion of his caseload. This fact will be his downfall. I left the restaurant and drove around the neighborhood. Could this be true? I asked myself. Or is he just toying with me? I could have hired a private detective, but if what he said was true, then they only met twice a month. This may turn out to be a waste of money, but what I could do was check her phone and email. This is exactly what I decided to do. I returned home, and Natalie was as out of sorts as ever. This suited me. I didn't want to talk to her until I found out the truth. After she went asleep on her side of the bed, I got up and checked her email. There was nothing suspicious there. Her phone was secured with a password, yet it didn't take me long to ascertain that our daughter's birth date was the code. I noticed a few messages that could have been misinterpreted, but none from Michael. His name was among her contacts, but then again, he was my closest companion, so it wasn't unusual. Perhaps he was merely speaking humorously. Nonetheless, her recent behavior led me to believe that something might be amiss, perhaps not with Michael, but with someone else. I retired to bed, tossing and turning in an attempt to find sleep. It must have been sometime after 2:43 a.m. when it occurred, as that was the last time I checked the clock. The following day at the hospital, Michael arrived and made jokes about surgeons' god complexes. This was typical of him. and I usually chuckled and let it pass. However, today I confronted him. Michael, what do you truly know about cardiothoracic surgery? I wager if I presented an anatomical model, you wouldn't be able to locate the correct placement for arterial cannulation. You jest that all surgeons are arrogant, yet I'm certain an anesthesiology resident could explain the biochemistry behind the very anesthetics you administer. Why don't you educate yourself? Michael looked at me, unsure of what to say. He knew I was correct. He couldn't explain the molecular mechanisms of action for half the drugs he used if his life depended on it. Michael was never one for academic pursuits. He possessed clinical skills and practical knowledge, but he had never been a scholar. I suppose that's why he gravitated towards me in medical school. I helped him with his studies so he could at least graduate. Now I find myself reconsidering my choice of companions, making me contemplate my choice of spouse. I retreated to my office, closing the door behind me, pondering how I could gather evidence of what might be transpiring. Confronting them both would only lead to denial. I needed proof. I contacted a private investigator in the city, expressing my concerns. However, he informed me that monitoring them would be too costly, given that it only occurred twice a month. Instead, he suggested installing a tracking application on my wife's phone, allowing me to track its location discreetly. He also mentioned the option of installing cameras in our home, but warned that unless I invested in high-quality, expensive ones, they would likely be discovered. I opted for the tracking program he recommended and assured him of payment for his advice, despite his insistence that I owed him nothing. I felt compelled to compensate him for his assistance. That evening, after everyone had retired for the night, I surreptitiously installed the tracking app on my wife's phone and synced it with mine. It would operate inconspicuously in the background, unbeknownst to her. The next day, I checked the app periodically, noting her whereabouts. She worked part-time at the hospital gift shop, typically for 15 to 20 hours a week, earning discretionary income, which she often spent at the salon. Later, she was at the grocery store before returning home. Michael, on the other hand, was at the hospital for most of the day, but coincidentally absent whenever Natalie was present. This provided some assurance that nothing untoward had occurred that day. Determined to mend relations with my wife and daughter, I suggested dining out together. Although my wife seemed somewhat apprehensive, my daughter Claire displayed typical teenage reluctance. Despite her hesitance, I insisted, and she reluctantly accompanied us. Dinner was pleasant, though I made a point to mention Michael in conversation. Natalie's discomfort was evident as she quickly changed the subject, further fueling my suspicions. I yearned to uncover the truth behind Michael's remarks. That evening, I refrained from checking her phone, finding no success in examining her calls or messages. Either she deleted them promptly or refrained from making any at all. As we settled into bed, I thanked Natalie for joining us for dinner. She responded with gratitude, hinting at intimacy with her gaze. Mixed emotions swirled within me. If she had been unfaithful, did I desire intimacy? Resolved to await concrete evidence, I decided to let her initiate any further intimacy, hesitant to reciprocate until I had confirmed my suspicions. I refrained from taking the initiative. Eventually, we engaged in intimacy, but it was rather mundane. There's no need to delve into specifics. Nonetheless, I found some enjoyment in it. For the remainder of the week, I monitored the location of her phone, finding nothing unusual. On Saturday evening, after she had fallen asleep, I checked her phone for any messages or calls, once again finding nothing. I was on the verge of convincing myself that Michael was merely boasting, fabricating tales to impress someone with his intimate escapades. This wasn't the first time. I had known this tendency since our medical school days. Returning to bed, I continued to toss and turn, my subconscious refusing to allow me rest. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I lay there, gazing at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Eventually, I rose from bed and made my way downstairs for a drink, hoping it would help me sleep. Seated with a glass of whiskey in one hand and her phone in the other, I decided to check it once more. Entering the password, our daughter's date of birth, I unlocked the phone and navigated to the home page. Suddenly, it struck me like an electric shock. Our daughter's birth date was the key. The pregnancy had been arduous. There were moments when we feared we might lose her. Something about her RH factor didn't align with my wife's. It felt as though my wife's body was at odds with the baby growing inside her. In the final 3 weeks of pregnancy, my wife was confined to bed rest to ensure she could carry the baby to term, and indeed she did. Exactly 9 months after our wedding, Claire was born. We were overjoyed that she was healthy, but she proved to be a challenging child. Constant crying, difficulty sleeping, reluctance to nurse. Whatever it was, it made things difficult. In the second year of Claire's life, my wife adamantly declared that we wouldn't be having another child. While it saddened me, the truth was, the arrival of our first child had drained much of the joy from our lives. Considering that she was born precisely 9 months after our wedding, she fell into the category often referred to as wedding night babies, conceived on the wedding night or during the honeymoon. A realization dawned on me. If Michael's claims were true, there was a strong likelihood that Natalie was already pregnant before our wedding night. Natalie had been on birth control pills, and we hadn't waited until marriage to engage in intimacy. In fact, it had been a significant part of our relationship. When questioned about Natalie's pregnancy, the doctor suggested that the stress of the wedding may have rendered the pills ineffective. If they were ineffective that night, it stood to reason they were ineffective before as well. Now I knew what needed to be done. There was a 50% chance that I wasn't the father. You know the saying, the early bird catches the worm? Well, in Michael's case, it seemed more fitting to say the early worm catches the birdie. Rising from the couch, I made my way to the bathroom, where I retrieved some cotton swabs, before heading to Claire's room. She was fast asleep, finally settling into a good sleep schedule at the age of 13. She lay there, snoring softly, mouth agape. It was easy enough for me to take a Q-tip and swab the inside of her cheek. She didn't stir as I carefully sealed it in a plastic Ziploc bag. I repeated the process for myself. If it turned out Claire was my biological daughter, it would still leave questions about Natalie's fidelity. If she wasn't genetically mine, well, I'd cross that bridge when I came to it. Sunday was dedicated to household chores, with each of us having our own responsibilities. I took my time, avoiding prolonged interaction with Natalie or Claire to conceal my emotions. Though eager to uncover the truth, doubts plagued me throughout the day. Natalie eventually questioned my demeanor, to which I quickly responded with a fabricated explanation about plans for our practice. She always referred to the practice as ours, which in a way was comforting, though in reality, I had established a separate entity for my surgical practice to protect my personal assets. Living in a conservative community, I was cautious not to let professional dealings impact my personal life negatively. The idea to pay off credit cards and minimize financial risks stemmed from a desire to shield myself from potential fallout if Natalie were to discover my plans. This sudden realization prompted me to take action. Early Monday morning, I took the samples to the University Medical Center and consulted with the head of the genetics department regarding paternity testing. They were accommodating, offering to conduct the necessary tests as part of their clinical genetics program. "We have a robust clinical genetics program," the department head said, "and we would be happy to run these samples for you." I gave him my business card and told him that I would be grateful for his discretion in this matter. "I understand completely," he replied. "Patient privacy is paramount." "This is deeply personal," I explained. "I'd be happy to offer consultations for any complex cardiothoracic cases you might need a second opinion on." "I appreciate that, Dr. Reynolds. I'll call you with the results as soon as they're available." I smiled when I left the university, but it was a concerned smile. The results could mean the end of my marriage. When I told Natalie about taking on additional surgical cases at the outreach clinic, it was only to hide my worried expression. Now I thought, this isn't a bad idea. I called Sarah, my practice manager and part-time surgical assistant, into my office and told her about my idea. "We will succeed," she said enthusiastically. "Sarah, there's something else I'd like to do. I would like to pay off the mortgage on my house. Can we arrange a lump sum payment so I can do this?" "Let me take a look at the financials and get back to you after lunch," she said as she left my office. I thought about calling my lawyer and asking for a referral to a family lawyer. Then I thought, you may be in a hurry. but let's see what the results are first. After all, I have yet to find any evidence that my wife was having an affair. After lunch, Sarah showed me the spreadsheet, and we discussed next steps for both of my plans. The next 2 days were some of the longest. I was on the verge of collapse while waiting for the DNA test results. Late on Wednesday evening, the head of the department called me. He was coming to my office with the results. When he arrived, I directed him straight to my private consultation room. He looked at me, and the look on his face told me what the results were. Then he spoke and confirmed it. The two samples collected are not related to each other. I nodded my head, and he could tell that although I had expected it, I was devastated by the news. He gave me a minute to think it over and handed me a manila envelope with the results. When I looked up at him, my expression changed. "So, what difficult case were you thinking I might consult on?" "Well," he said thoughtfully, "we have a patient with a complex thoracic aortic aneurysm that could benefit from your expertise." I told him that I would be happy to review the case and that I might have some innovative approaches that could help. We scheduled the time to meet later in the week to discuss the patient. When he left, I told Sarah that I would leave early, but if she needed me, I would only be a phone call away. I knew she wouldn't call even if she needed me. She could handle almost anything that needed to be done. I drove around the city, just watching. Strange, but for me, everything looked different. Then I called my lawyer. He was saddened by the news, but referred me to another lawyer who he knew would handle the situation appropriately. After calling, I made an appointment for late evening the next day. I had a snack at a restaurant and thought while I was eating, have I really wasted the last 14 years of my life? I couldn't even say that I had a child from this marriage. Of course, I still considered her to some extent my child, but biologically, she was not. What should I do next? I knew I couldn't act like I didn't know anything. Of course, I wasn't ignorant before, but now that I knew, there was no turning back. One thing I knew for sure, Michael would pay. I didn't care that he had been my best friend for years. With friends like him, I could use more enemies. Natalie would pay too. I wondered if she knew Claire wasn't mine. Even if not, she hid this secret from me. The secret of her intimacy on her wedding day with my best man, my best friend. Now I had no reason not to believe what I had overheard. She had been with him at least twice a month. I started to feel angry, and before I got out of control, I needed to be alone, away from everyone. I should have called Natalie and told her I wouldn't be home that evening. I couldn't go home. I would most likely do something that would land me in jail. She answered the call. "Hello, Marcus?" "Hey, I'm going to spend the night in the city so I can prepare for a complex surgery tomorrow at 8. I said emotionlessly. "Oh, fine, bon voyage." I don't usually stay in the city for surgeries, so this was unusual. I wondered if she would take advantage of the fact that I would be gone all night. She would have to find a sitter for Claire, and it would be difficult to explain. However, I would periodically look at her phone tracker throughout the evening to see if she had decided to go somewhere else. I followed the roads to the city. I wanted to arrange consultations with at least 20 patients from the outlying communities, including the complex aortic case. I would arrange to have them scheduled and sent to my clinic after reviewing their medical records. Now the question in my head was, who to entrust their preoperative assessments to? I knew that Michael would not get any more work from me after his current cases were completed. When he hears that I have 24 new surgical candidates, dollar signs will appear in his eyes, calculating how much he can charge for all the anesthesia. However, this will not happen, and I will keep it a secret until the last minute. I needed to talk to one of the department chiefs to see who would be good enough and reliable enough to handle anesthesia for these cases before bringing them into our hospital. I got to the city around 9 p.m. and checked into a modest hotel. Even though I was well compensated, I could not justify spending excessive amounts on accommodations from the practice's accounts. The room was comfortable, as was the bed. That's all I needed. I am a simple person with simple needs. When I entered the room, I immediately checked Natalie's phone tracker. I discovered that she was still at home, or at least her phone was at home. That night, sleep was difficult. I kept going over in my mind why she did what she did. How could she justify having a night with him on her wedding day, let alone twice a month for who knows how many years? I began to reconsider our marriage. It was never perfect, but I thought we loved each other exclusively. Now I know that this was a mistake on my part from the very beginning. In the first few years after the wedding, things were not easy. Of course, we weren't expecting a baby right away. We originally planned to wait 3 to 4 years and then start a family. 3 children is what we agreed on before the wedding. However, the struggle with Claire ruined these plans. When I found out that these plans were ruined by my best friend, all the struggle began to seem in vain. 14 years of wasted effort. There had been good times, of course, but even those were now overshadowed by this news. If Natalie hadn't had intimacy with Michael, maybe she would have gotten pregnant with me, and maybe she wouldn't have had such a bad pregnancy and difficult child that made her not want anymore. Michael ruined my life when he seduced my future wife on my wedding day. Now he entertains her at least twice a month, and I'm sure that all the time, he laughs at the ignorant surgeon who thinks he's God. He must pay, I thought to myself, lying down and trying to sleep. I was furious again. I needed to calm down, otherwise I wouldn't be able to sleep. I turned on the TV to some mindless medical drama. Laughter at the show's inaccuracies helped me calm down, and by 11 p.m., I was ready to fall asleep, looking forward to a long day. The consultations went well. I identified some great surgical candidates and got to know some specialists in the city area. I didn't see any appropriate anesthesiologists right away, so I started asking other surgeons. 2 of them recommended candidates. One was experienced in cardiac cases, the other in complex thoracic procedures. I asked if they would be willing to collaborate once I determined which cases would be scheduled first. Of course, each of them said, "Just let me know when you need coverage, and we'll arrange it." I should have come to the city more often. Communication with other physicians engaged in the same specialty inspired me to expand my practice. Besides, it distracted me from my problems. In the afternoon, when I met with the lawyer, the news was not very good. I would lose half of all my property and would have to pay alimony and child support for a child that wasn't even mine. Then I decided that I would not get a divorce. Instead, I'll leave her with Michael's baby. I would pay off the mortgage on the house. She could stay in it, but my name was the only one on the mortgage, so she couldn't sell it. If I moved out but continued to pay taxes and utilities, she wouldn't be able to negotiate and take the house. However, I had to decide what to do with my practice. It was registered as a professional corporation, but somehow I knew that if I didn't do something to protect it, I could lose it. I needed to talk to my business lawyer about this. When I walked through the door of my house, I was exhausted from a long day, so I said to Natalie, "I'm tired. I'm going to take a shower and go straight to bed," and went to the bedroom. "Do you want to have dinner?" she called. "No, I had a late lunch," I answered. At least she thought to ask. The shower was wonderful. It felt like my problems almost melted away. I had problems, but I was on my way to solving them. I fell asleep a few minutes after my head hit the pillow. I had been stressed for the past week, and now that I had started making a plan of action, my mind could rest. Waking up early and feeling refreshed, I headed to the clinic before Natalie, and Claire even woke up. I had things to do and even more plans. When my staff started arriving, they found me knee-deep in spreadsheets, financial reports, and surgical forecasts. I told Sarah that I had arranged consultations for 23 potential cases and that within a week, we would finalize the arrangements for the complex aortic case at the university. I told my surgical coordinator not to assign any more cases to Michael, but to keep it a secret. She looked at me with a puzzled expression. "You're the boss." "Thank you, Sarah. You are irreplaceable." At 9 a.m., I called my business lawyer and asked him what I should do. "Well, your practice is registered, but there may still be a way she can force you to liquidate assets to get half of its value. Have you thought about restructuring beforehand?" "No. Do I need to?" "This will keep the practice out of her hands," he said. "This practice is my life. I can't get rid of it." I told him. "Okay, let me think a little and study the situation. I'll call you at the end of the week." This news was devastating. I have worked hard to build my practice into what it is today. This is my child, unlike Claire, I thought to myself. Now I was filled with rage again. Part of being a good surgeon is the ability to compartmentalize and multitask. I needed to put my personal problems aside and get back to work. First on my list was to call Dr. Chun the department chair who was handling the complex aortic case. Dr. Chun? Marcus Reynolds here. I've been thinking about that aortic case you mentioned. Yes, I've reviewed the imaging studies you sent, and I'm concerned about the proximal extension. What approach are you considering? He asked. I'm thinking of a hybrid procedure, endovascular with a surgical extension. But I'd like to meet to discuss options. That sounds promising. When can we meet? Is tomorrow or the next day suitable for you? Of course. Call my office to arrange it. Fine. I hung up and called the hospital where the patient was currently admitted to arrange a consultation. In the meantime, Michael arrived. He had several cases that still needed to be managed, and being an independent practitioner, he could come and go as he pleased. As long as the anesthesia was handled properly at the time I needed to operate, I was fine with it. He overheard several staff members talking about the 23 potential cases that would soon be scheduled at our hospital. Hey, Marcus, where are these patients coming from? He asked. Outreach clinics. I want to make sure I have a schedule to handle them efficiently, I said. It was difficult for me to talk to him calmly. This damn traitor. Okay, I'll contact the surgical coordinator and ask her to put me on the schedule, he said. I just chuckled to myself as he left. That weekend, I tried to keep my distance from Natalie. I worked in the yard and ran a lot of errands. I didn't even check her phone tracker. For me, it no longer mattered. I felt only contempt for her. The fact that I was raising someone else's child was unforgivable. On Monday, I was at the hospital again. I called Dr. Chun and told him I would drive over to review the patient's records in person and discuss our surgical approach. He replied, "Great, we'll have a late lunch when you arrive." It was a good day for a trip, so I told Sarah that I would be gone all day. Hold the fort, I told her. Okay, boss, she replied. She truly was irreplaceable. I need to give her a raise, I told myself. The trip was pleasant, as was the lunch. The other surgeon made me feel welcome, and I felt like I had a new colleague. On the way back, driving my Audi, I really enjoyed myself. The surgical approach we had developed together was innovative, and I felt professionally revitalized. I decided that I would call another specialist and develop a partnership for complex cases. I needed to live a little, and I won't be needing more family accommodations anytime soon. I pulled into our driveway in my car. Natalie looked out the window and must have said something to Claire because they both came out to watch. Honey, why are you so late? You know we need you for Claire's science project, she said condescendingly. I just had a consultation in the city for a complex case. Thought you might want to hear about it, I replied. No, honey, I don't like medical talk at home, Natalie said with slight contempt. Claire, I said, motioning for my daughter to come over. No, Dad, I feel bad enough that they tease me because my dad's a surgeon. I don't want to be seen talking about medicine with you. She said it like only a teenager could say it. I was stunned, to say the least. Where did this disrespect come from? When I looked at Natalie, I realized that she was acting as if Claire had done nothing wrong. Great, now both women in my house are disrespectful to me. I know teenagers aren't supposed to be best buddies with their parents, but the hurtful way she said it made me look at my entire family life as a sham. Well, I'm going to go for another drive. I'll be back as soon as I can, I said, putting the car in reverse and driving away that I drove along the roads of our city and its environs. Furious, my marriage was rapidly deteriorating. When I finally pulled into the driveway at 9:30, I immediately went upstairs, hopped in the shower, and climbed into bed. When I didn't come down from my shower, Natalie got up and came into the room. The light from the corridor shone directly into my eyes. I squinted and closed them. What? Are your feelings hurt because we didn't choose to hear about your surgical heroics? Aren't you going to come down and spend time with your family? You were not only a surgeon, you were also childish. Where did this attitude come from? I had to believe it came from Michael. She spent time with him, and his stripped-down attitude towards my profession rubbed off on her. Now she is passing it on to her daughter. It was her daughter, not mine. I guess I should get that into my head. I may have to support her, but she is not my daughter. It looks like you and your daughter would rather not have a surgeon around, so you might as well just fuck off. I was furious, and her attitude wasn't helping her one bit. She'll regret ever treating me the way she does now. Needless to say, from then on, The Reynolds house was quiet and cold. The next day, I called Dr. Chun, and he came to review our surgical plan. He was delighted. We talked the procedures over, and he was impressed with my approach, innovative but evidence-based. When he was about to leave, having finalized all the details, he said, "My colleague is in charge of regional cardiac referrals for the hospital network, and we handle about 16 complex cases approximately every 2 months. I know it's not much, but could you collaborate with us?" "Always happy to work with skilled colleagues, and you know I'll bring value to the team," I said. "I'll ask Dr. Wilson to call you at the end of this week." "Thank you," I said. That's how I grew my practice, by treating people right and letting them know I valued their expertise. On Wednesday, my lawyer called me. "Hey, Marcus, I think I have a solution to your potential problem. Could you come by this afternoon to discuss it with me?" "Of course. I can't wait to start." "The atmosphere in my house is becoming simply unbearable," I said. At the meeting that day, I heard the plan and liked it. It would take about 2 weeks to implement, but if it worked, it would be worth it. During these 2 weeks, I slowly moved personal belongings and medical references from my home to an apartment in a nearby city. Also during those 2 weeks, Michael was anxiously waiting for those 24 cases to be scheduled so he could bill for the anesthesia services. When he asked, I just put it off. This past weekend, I did some yard work, and when Natalie and Claire weren't around, I cleaned out my closet and drawers. Natalie did laundry during the week so she could do what she wanted on the weekends. This was good for me because she didn't notice that my closet was empty. So this takes me back to that Monday night when I said to Natalie, "I'm leaving." She started being rude and disrespectful to me again, both as a surgeon and as a person. In the past, I would go to a hotel for a night or two, depending on how angry I was. On Tuesday morning after this explosion, I arrived at the clinic early, and as my employees were entering, I asked them to go to the conference room. I closed the door behind them. I had weekly meetings, so this was nothing unusual. I started the meeting. "Good morning. As you all know, the patients that I evaluated a couple of weeks ago will be scheduled soon. All of them have already been assessed and prepared, so they are ready for surgery right now. We no longer use Dr. Tanner for any anesthesia here. If he asks you, tell him we decided to go in a different direction and leave it at that. You've all been amazing. You're like family, so it's hard for me to come to terms with what's next." I paused and wiped a tear from my eye. I restructured the practice. They all looked at me. There was surprise in their eyes. "However, nothing will change as far as your work is concerned. Well, besides Sarah, you will perform some of my administrative duties and, of course, will receive a corresponding increase." All of them, even in their surprised state, began to congratulate Sarah. They all respected her and knew she deserved it. "Sarah, after the meeting, please come and talk to me. We will discuss some things. I will still be involved in the practice, but only on a consultative basis, and may perform surgery occasionally. I don't want to take away your surgical assistance roles." They were all glad that I would still be around, at least sometimes. The meeting ended, and as we walked out the door, Michael was standing there. "Hey, why wasn't I included in the meeting?" He had been present at most of the previous meetings. "Because it was a staff meeting, and you're not an employee," I said. He stuttered a little, and then said, "I see that the patients have finally been scheduled, so I'll get to work on the pre-op assessments right away." "No, they have already been carefully examined and prepared for surgery. You don't need to do anything with them," I said sternly. He looked at me, stunned. "But I handle all your anesthesia, Marcus. What's happening?" "Michael, I restructured the practice, and the new arrangement includes dedicated anesthesiology support. I'm moving in a different direction," I told him, not ready to explode at him. "I'll save that for another day." I left everything as is. It became clear to me that sometimes it is better to say fewer words. "I can't believe you restructured the practice," he exclaimed. "What should I do now?" Of course, it was all about him. He was basically told that he was out of work. "Well," I said, "you can pick up your check for what you did in the last 2 weeks. It wasn't that much. My surgical coordinator used his services only a few times. He was relaxing before the anticipated flood of cases, thinking he would be busy when they were scheduled. How wrong he was. I didn't feel sorry for him at all. I just wish I could tell him that it was because he was a traitor When I met Sarah, I asked her if she could keep our conversation a secret. Of course, Marcus. You know I'll never say anything you don't want, she assured me. Okay, here's the thing. I created 2 medical corporations that I registered in Nevada. One of the corporations buys this practice, the other buys that corporation. I am the sole owner of shares in both companies. At some point, I will divorce Natalie and make sure she doesn't get the business. Why? She asked. I moved out of my house. Natalie doesn't know it yet, but I'm not going back. She had an affair with Michael. Actually, Claire is not my daughter. I believe she is Michael's daughter. I don't even know if Natalie knows about this, let alone Michael. They'll soon find out. I'm not going to get a divorce, but I will continue to pay utilities and taxes for our house. This way, she won't be able to say that I abandoned her and take everything I have. Just in case she files for divorce due to irreconcilable differences, I don't want her to be able to take over the business. That's why I arranged for the practice to be bought twice. Let them try to figure out what's going on. The proceeds from the sale will be spent by the time she gets her divorce. Plus, I make next to nothing from consulting and a few commissions from surgical assists. Sarah, you were able to cope with daily operations. I'll be available to call if you have any questions, but let me say that I trust you and I trust your judgment. The smile came back to her face when I told her about the new ownership structure, but when she heard about Natalie and Michael, she looked like she was ready to throw a surgical instrument at someone. This was a woman whom I truly admired and respected. I continued, I have one more task for you, and then I will leave you. I need you to order a new sign and letterhead. We are changing the name of the practice. This will further cement in Michael and Natalie's minds that the business has been restructured with new ownership. The new name of the practice will be Betrayed Cardiac Surgery. I spelled the name so I knew she had it right. She looked at me in bewilderment. Someday I'll tell you why I chose this name. Suffice it to say, it tells the whole story, I said. She still looked puzzled, but she trusted me enough to follow my instructions. With that, I left, saying a few words to everyone as I departed. I got into my car, an Audi, and drove down the road towards the city. About 2 hours passed when I received a call. Caller ID told me it was Natalie. I didn't expect her to call before the end of the evening. This has happened many times before. When I left, I'd go away for a day or two, she'd call, we'd talk, and I'd come back. Everything changed for a while, and then we became the same again. After a while, we would have a quarrel again, and the cycle would start all over again. I decided to answer the call, waiting to hear what nonsense she would spew this time. Hello, I said through the speakerphone in the car. Marcus, what's going on? She said somewhat hesitantly. Nothing, just going to the city. What? So what I heard must not be true. So Michael must have called her. I figured if he were speaking, he'd call his mistress to find out what is happening with her husband. I don't know, I said. What did you hear? Michael called me and said that you restructured the practice. Why would he call you? I asked, perplexing her. She corrected herself. He's your best friend. He wondered if I knew what was going on. Best friend. What a joke. I was a joke to him. The stupid surgeon who is helpless and does not know what is happening behind his back with his own wife. Apparently, my family was embarrassed that I was a cardiothoracic surgeon. So, yes, I restructured the practice. Now you won't have to bear that stigma anymore. Shouldn't we have talked about this first? She said. I'm sure she was worried about how we would live now. This is my practice. I own it. I founded it before we got married, and I can restructure it whenever I want. I just hope the new arrangement treats my former employees well. So did you get a good price for it? Again, she was worried about how this would affect her standard of living. I didn't care. I just knew I needed to change how I practice. I'll start looking at alternatives after I take a few weeks off to relax. What about the mortgage? She asked. Oh, I used the money to pay off the house. You don't have to worry about that now. You just need to pay utilities and taxes. What about food? What about gas? What about insurance? She said, almost hysterical. Oh, I guess I'm a stupid surgeon. I didn't even think about them. Do you think you could take on more hours at your job? Now she was agitated. When are you going to come back home? This is the moment of truth. I won't come back, I said casually. What? I told you that evening that I was leaving. You told me not to come back. So I won't come back. Don't worry, I'll find a way to pay all the utilities so the power won't be turned off. You can't do this, Marcus. You must come back. I heard the desperation in her voice. No, I really don't want to, I said dispassionately. Marcus, don't do this, she cried. I did it already. What about your daughter? She asked, trying to tug at my heartstrings. You mean Claire? The girl who is ashamed of her last name and the fact that her old man is a surgeon. Marcus, she's just a 13-year-old girl. You can't take this to heart. Well, it doesn't matter anymore. I won't be back again, so none of you will be embarrassed of me. With these words, I hung up and turned off the phone. Let her think about it. I knew that now she was trying to call me back and would be angry that I wasn't answering the phone. After calming down from the phone call, I tried to enjoy the leisurely drive to the city. I could only assume that the next call she would make was to her lover Michael, to get more information and to let him know what I had said. When I got to my destination, I turned my phone back on and saw that I had 5 messages. I listened to them all, 3 from Natalie, 1 from Michael, and 1 from Sarah. I immediately called Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Sorry my phone was turned off. I have had unwanted calls. Yes, I know. Your wife and Michael called me to find out where you were. I told them you don't own this place anymore, so you don't come in anymore. Hope everything is okay. Great, I said. If they give you too much trouble, tell them you're calling the police about phone harassment. I like it, she said. Marcus, you may feel like you don't have any family or friends anymore, but trust me, you do. We are your family and always will be. Thank you, Sarah. You know what to say? I hope your husband knows how lucky he is. Trust me, he knows. He constantly tells me about this. Never lose this. Don't take each other for granted. I'm not going to, she said. After hanging up, I wondered if I should call my cheating wife or that traitor Michael. No, let them rage. I got out of the Audi and went into the Cardiac Institute office. The director was waiting for me there. I have that complex case that I told you about. Would you like to discuss if we can collaborate on it? Let's see, he said. He was impressed with my surgical plan, both comprehensive and innovative, as well as my documented outcomes. He looked at me. I can integrate you into our team within a week. Are you sure you want to make this move? I feel like you're getting a raw deal. You can reciprocate sometime in the future. I'm not here to make money. I'm here to practice excellent surgery. Half an hour later, I was back on the road, enjoying the drive. Now I had to decide where to go. North sounded good, so I headed to the University Medical Center. Over the next 2 weeks, I traveled through several medical centers in the region, northern New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. I wanted to be nearby in case Sarah needed me to come back. I called her several times, and when it became clear that she had everything under control, I decided to head west. Of course, Natalie and Michael kept calling me. At first, they were annoyed, then apologetic, and finally, there were notes of hostility in their messages. I listened, but I didn't care. When they called me and told me that the credit card had been canceled, I just laughed. When Michael called and said I was a terrible person for leaving Natalie and Claire, I had to laugh even more that my lawyer actually sent me a message. Natalie called and threatened to file a stay-at-home order if you didn't contact her and come back. I called him back. Hello, this is Marcus. So my wife called you with threats. I said, yes, but I wouldn't worry. If you're still paying on the house, she'll have a hard time proving abandonment. I can do something better for you. I have a recording where I tell her I'm leaving, and she tells me not to come back. It's amazing. Send me a copy of it, he said. If she gives me any trouble, I'll take it to her lawyer. Let her lawyer try to force things. Thank you. I'll call you in a week to find out what's going on. I've traveled all over the Southwest. The Audi was comfortable, and it was a refreshing change. A lot of people looked at me with respect. Even some attractive women showed interest in casual conversation, but I wasn't looking for that. After all, I was still married, no matter what. I drove to various medical centers, consulting on difficult cases, attending conferences, and networking with colleagues. I zigzagged through the region, seeing innovative practices and surgical approaches that broadened my perspective. I was in no hurry, stopped at hospitals, talked to the chiefs of surgery, and just chatted. Some of them were jealous that a surgeon in his 40s could just pick up and travel. After about 3 months and 8,000 miles, I decided to return to my original hospital. When I arrived at Betrayed Cardiac Surgery, I was greeted by my entire team. In fact, there were several new faces. They all welcomed my return. When I entered Sarah's office, formerly my office, she raised her head. When she saw me, her smile grew even wider. She stood up, walked around her desk, and hugged me tightly. We talked for a while, and then I asked, "Do you think I can invite everyone to Antonio's for food and drinks? Could you close the clinic at 5? At this point, it was 3, and I had a few errands to run. Of course, I will insist on this. The whole team will be there. I said goodbye and told them all that I'd see them in 2 hours. They were in a good mood. Then I visited my lawyer. He told me earlier, when I was traveling, that Natalie tried to go down the abandonment route to get all my property, but he was able to thwart her efforts. We talked about what to do next. At 5, I met the team at Antonio's restaurant. We had a great dinner, and it was nice talking to everyone. After about an hour and a half, they began to go home. Finally, it was just Sarah and me. I leaned back. She looked at me and said, "You know, Marcus, you may think that you are betrayed, vulnerable, and don't understand anything, but you're wrong. You simply trusted those you loved." I looked at her. "So you got it, right?" "Yes, it took me a while, but you said the new name would tell the whole story." This haunted me until I realized it. You may be a surgeon, but all these stereotypes can never describe the real you. These jokes are an insult to you and your dedication. Thank you, Sarah. You are truly the main reason for my return. I had to see how you handle my responsibilities. Happy to say that you have not filled my shoes, but rather created a pair of your own. I had an excellent mentor, she thanked me. We hugged, and she went home to her husband. He truly was a fortunate man. I returned to the apartment I had not been in for 3 months. It was musty and needed good ventilation. I opened the windows and let the cool evening air fill the rooms. I grabbed a beer and sat on the terrace overlooking the pool. Several people were swimming there, and a family was playing. I thought about Natalie and me. We had such high hopes and dreams when we got married. Now they have all disappeared. Looking at the clock on the wall, I saw that it was about 8:30. A thought flashed through my head. Looks like it's time for a showdown. I got up, jumped into my Audi, and drove to my house. I guess, technically, it was still mine. I bought it before Natalie and I got married, and my name was the only one on the deed. I was disappointed when I pulled into the driveway. The yard was not well kept. It seemed that the landscaping had not even been touched. The light was on, and I assumed Natalie was home. I went to the door and knocked. A minute later, the door opened, and Claire stood there. Her eyes got big, and she asked, "Dad." "Hi, Claire. Is your mom home?" She stuttered and then shouted, "Mother." I heard Natalie shout from the kitchen in a tense, high-pitched voice, "What's the matter?" She continued to look at me and said loudly in response, "Dad." Natalie came around the corner, saw me, and screamed, "Where are you going?" I decided to answer her cry in a calm, even voice. At that moment, Michael came out of the bedroom, wearing only his underpants. "Oh," I said, "the whole family is here. Mom, Dad, and child. What the hell are you talking about?" Natalie spat back. "I suppose Michael moved to take my place. After all, it is rightfully his." Natalie looked at me with a puzzled expression. Claire said, "He lost his practice privileges after you restructured, and Mom needed a man to help pay the bills and take care of other responsibilities here since you left." Then the rage in her voice was palpable. "Well, young lady, it appears you were misinformed," I said calmly. "Michael was never my employee, by his insistence, so I could not fire him. As for bills, all utilities are paid, as is your car insurance. What about food and gasoline in the car?" Natalie shouted, "You had a job. Did you lose it?" "I know that before. It was just your mad money, but it was enough for groceries and gasoline while I was away." "So you think you'll come back and just move back in?" she asked. "No. I'll wait until you and your lover find somewhere to live." It was obvious that they were sleeping together in my house, and Claire seemed okay with that. "I'm not going to move out of my house," Natalie said. "Correction, this is my house. It was mine before we got married, and only my name is written on the deed," I replied. "Well, you left, so now it's mine. The law doesn't work that way. Since I pay the utilities and taxes, I am still the legal owner. And even though I've been gone for a short period of time, I still own it. Don't worry, I'll give you lovebirds until the end of next month to find a place to live. Just make sure you take your daughter with you. What do you mean, your daughter? She is our daughter. You couldn't think of more truthful words. I chuckled. Natalie looked puzzled. Then I said to Claire, Claire, I know you hate being associated with surgery, so I have good news for you. Your real father is not me, but Michael. The silence in the room was deafening. After a minute, Natalie meekly asked, What? Yes, Natalie, it seems that your little indiscretion on your wedding day led to the appearance of a child. Not mine, but Michael's. Good news for you, Claire. You can now take your real dad's last name and become Claire Tanner. I wonder if maybe Mom didn't insist on the name Claire as a sign of respect for her lover. I looked at Natalie, and she looked at Michael. He was white as a ghost. What? Michael, don't you want to be a dad? Well, that's a shame. Take responsibility. But look at it this way. It's just 4 more years, and then college. Natalie and Michael said almost in unison, I do not believe that. I threw them the DNA report. See for yourself. They grabbed it, looked at it, and then both stood in stunned silence. Claire, tell the lovebirds that your mom will be served with divorce papers sometime next week, along with an eviction notice. I turned and walked away. The whole time I was gone, I wondered if this affair had been going on throughout the marriage. In fact, I wondered if she was ever faithful to me. We met when she came in for a pre-op consultation. Michael was administering anesthesia for a procedure, and we both thought she would be a great date. Did she choose me or not? I truly was betrayed, ignorant, vulnerable. All this time, Michael laughed at me behind my back and also made surgeon jokes in front of my face that I returned to the apartment and drank beer. In the morning, I went to the lawyer and asked him to start processing the documents. Of course, I knew that I would have to sell the house and split the proceeds. But being a hard-working person, I did not have to pay alimony or child support, especially since there was already another man in my place. At least that's what I hoped. I loved Natalie, and I thought Michael was my friend. The betrayal was incredible. It will take me a long time to trust anyone again, be it a man or a woman. Maybe I should see a psychologist. As the divorce proceedings progressed, I returned to work at the cardiac practice, but as a consultant surgeon. I made it clear to all employees that I was no longer the boss and that I only needed 1 case a week to pay the rent and buy groceries. In fact, I insisted on only 1. When it came to court-mandated child support, I wanted to ensure that at the end of the month, I had no money other than for my own modest living expenses. Natalie hired a lawyer. I don't know how she could afford it. Maybe he worked pro bono. He'll be surprised. They looked at my bank accounts and saw that I had spent the proceeds from the restructuring. They even looked at the corporate changes, but found nothing wrong with them. They didn't dig deep enough. I heard from my fellow surgeons that while I was away, Michael came in almost every day for the first 2 weeks and talked to Sarah about getting some cases. She had no problem telling him no every time. In the end, he gave up. Now he regretted never getting his advanced fellowship certification because the only job he could find was at a community hospital with a salary of $130,000 per year. I hope Natalie went full-time, or they would have a hard time making ends meet. I contacted the realtor and informed Natalie that I was putting the house on the market in anticipation of a 50-50 split of all of our assets. She had already been served with an eviction notice, so she had to move out before the house was sold and closed. One evening, there was a knock on my door. Of course, it was Natalie. Opening the door, I looked at her. What do you need? Marcus, can we talk? I don't think this is a good idea. We're in a lawsuit against each other. Come on, Marcus, it's just me here. No lawyers. Can't we sit down and have a civil conversation? Yeah, I guess, but let's go to St. Louis Cafe, I said. There will be witnesses, I thought to myself. I didn't trust her enough to be alone with her. We sat down in a booth at the cafe, and after a couple of minutes of pleasantries, I asked, Why, Natalie? She looked at me, hesitated, and answered, I think the simple answer is that I liked both of you, you and Michael. I couldn't decide. So you were dating both of us at the same time? She looked down at the table. Yes, she admitted. But Michael told me not to tell you anything because he knew it would ruin your personal and work relationship with him. So when I asked you to marry me, why did you say yes? I asked. Because I loved you. What about Michael? I asked. I loved him too, but I understood that he would never be a suitable husband. When you asked me, he and I discussed it and ended our relationship. I wanted to focus on us and the preparations for our wedding. So on your wedding day, while having a night with him, you said, I'm marrying him, but you're still my man. She started crying. Everything was wrong. Then what was it, Natalie? She hesitated and then said, I didn't want to lose him, and he didn't want to lose me. Well, now you have each other, and your child. By the way, she did a great job with the name. I didn't even notice until I had time to think during the 3 months on the road. I didn't know Claire wasn't yours, I said. I really didn't. Then she looked at me and said, Marcus, I wanted to talk to you today to tell you that I still love you. It's nice to hear from you, Natalie, but I don't think you know what love is. I loved you more than anything in the world, and obviously, you can't say the same. I loved you, but I can honestly say that I don't love you anymore. I loved you with all my heart, but now I feel only contempt for you, I said. When I said this, she looked up at me and realized that our relationship was over. There will never be us again. I had to ask her one more question. Have you ever stopped? She hesitated and then, apparently, decided that it didn't matter and told the truth. We never stopped. We had our issues, but we got together, usually twice a month. I was hoping for a different answer, but I was still glad she told me the truth. One more question. What happened about a year ago that made you treat me so badly? Your attitude towards me began to change. The outward contempt was obvious. Her face turned red, then she got a little angry. Michael started trying to talk me into having a threesome, and not with you. I probably could have done it if you had participated, but we couldn't figure out how to do it. He kept insisting on it, and it made me resent you for something I know you would never do. I know it sounds strange, but I thought I could have my 2 men loving me together, and I resented you for not being the person to allow it. So you did it? I asked. No, she said. I thought about it, but then you left, and my whole world collapsed. Well, now you can do it, knowing that I don't care what you do. It doesn't bother me anymore, I said. For months later, we stood before a judge, and he declared us divorced. Michael was there too. As we were leaving the courthouse, Natalie said, Maybe we can have drinks? Get closure. Of course, I said. By this time, the animosity I felt towards the two of them had disappeared. Then I thought, this will be the last time I have to be with them. Now they can be alone. Let them live in their own world. They deserve each other. Natalie will have to get used to a lower standard of living. I may be a surgeon with a God complex, but I am a respected person in this community, and I will rebuild my life without their betrayal.